Alrighty, I'd like to introduce Will Deady, the chairman of the History and Artifacts Committee of the Corinthian Yacht Club. And Will, you and I have kind of gone over some early history of our club, and you've given me lots of information you've shared with me. So I'd like to start off with some of the things that you recall that were going on around the bay when we were formed, back in 1886 and before, because there were a lot of other yacht clubs already formed in the East Coast that actually had our name. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, there's, at one point in 1800s, there occurred what some people refer to as the Corinthian movement, which was groups that, similar to ours, that felt that they were being ignored by the yacht clubs that existed at that time. That began in the late 1800s. Probably the first one, I'm not sure of this, but I suspect the first one was in England. It's now the Royal Corinthian Yacht Club.
Oh, okay, I didn't have that one, okay. Royal Corinthian Yacht Club.
The first one we know of, at least that I know of in this country, was at Oyster Bay, New York, a group that's now known as the Sewanaka Corinthian Yacht Club.
Okay.
Originally, I think they just were Sewanaka, and they got into the Corinthian atmosphere, and so they added Corinthian to their name. And I believe that's the first one in this country.
Okay.
Later, the Corinthian Yacht Club in Marblehead, Massachusetts was established. Just, 9 months earlier than we were. They were in July of 1885, and we were in March of 1886.
Okay.
Formed for almost exactly the same reasons. Here we had two yacht clubs on the bay, the Pacific Yacht Club and the San Francisco Yacht Club. I should have said that in reverse order because San Francisco was the original.
Yeah, what year was that, Will? Do you remember? San Francisco. San Francisco Yacht Club.
San Francisco Yacht Club was formed in 1869.
1869, okay. And when was the Pacific, do you know?
Pacific was 1872.
Okay, still both before us.
Yeah, now this is a little off of what I was saying a minute ago, off the subject, but this is a good subject too. San Francisco was formed in 1869, and they were in San Francisco, south of the 3rd Street Bridge, where the 3rd Street Bridge is now. They were on property owned by the Southern Pacific Railroad. And I guess the Southern Pacific Railroad had other ideas to do with their property, so they in effect got kicked out.
San Francisco got kicked out.
Yeah, San Francisco Yacht Club got kicked out. They had some sort of a clubhouse over there. There wasn't much available space for them in San Francisco because the waterfront was all commercial. So they decided to move to Sausalito. And that caused a rift in the club because over where they were going to locate in Sausalito. One group wanted to locate in one spot, another group wanted to locate in another spot. And ended up, I guess the rift got so bad, the other group formed another yacht club called the Pacific.
Oh, okay.
The original group, the San Francisco Yacht Club, established on Bridgeway in a building that's still there. Well, it's their second building. The first building burned down, but their second building is where Horizon's restaurant is now. That building was the San Francisco Yacht Club. The Pacific Yacht Club was up in Hurricane Gulch. Against the hill is Alexander, where Alexander Valley kind of winds around.
Alexander Avenue, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's up against that hill. I think they thought maybe they were protected by the hill or something. But anyway, that's where they established. So there was those two yacht clubs existed, and our guys didn't think that they were really welcome there, or didn't seem to fit there with the clientele there. Seemed to favor big, large boats, and many of them sailed with hired crews. And so Corinthian, the word Corinthian at that time meant, well, there's many meanings to the word Corinthian, but the meaning that was in vogue at that time was amateur. And these were guys that wanted to sail their own boats, work on their own boats, and all of that. Now, the Corinthian Yacht Club in Marblehead, Massachusetts was formed because there were two yacht clubs that did just what I was talking about of the two here. They had big boats. They wanted to sail them sometimes with hired crews. And there were these guys who were amateur. And the Marblehead case, there was the Boston Yacht Club and the Eastern Yacht Club. I don't know anything about the history of those two, except that they were there and caused the Corinthian to be formed in 1885, which was just ahead of us by a few months. It's interesting that when our club was formed, the original bylaws named the club the Corinthian Yacht Club. Well, later, that was changed. When we incorporated under the name Corinthian Yacht Club of San Francisco. Probably because our people found out that there was a Corinthian Yacht Club in Marblehead.
Oh, okay.
I'm just surmising that.
But when was that
logical.
incorporated later,
Pardon?
that name? Corinthian Yacht Club of San Francisco, when did they, because originally that wasn't in our name in 1886, right?
No. We were formed in 1886, but we were not incorporated until I think it was 1896.
Right, that's what you told me.
In 1896, they incorporated under the longer name.
Okay.
Okay, let's see, where was I?
We were talking about creating the Corinthian Yacht Club in Marblehead, and then we came along
Yes.
a few months later.
Okay, right. And there are Corinthian yacht clubs at quite a number of places. There's a Corinthian Yacht Club in Philadelphia. There's a Corinthian Yacht Club that was in Washington, D.C., but they've moved down to the mouth of the Potomac River. There's a Corinthian Yacht Club at Point, what's the name of the point at the tip of...
Are you talking about New Jersey?
Yes.
Cape May.
Cape May. There's a Corinthian Yacht Club in Cape May.
Yeah.
That's correct. There's a Corinthian Yacht Club in Seattle. I don't know anything about that one. Then there's a lot of clubs with the name Corinthian in their name, with Corinthian in their name. Not all of them are formed during that period. Some of them were formed later, and I suspect the word Corinthian just means sailing to them.
And how did that tie in with what was going on in the bay with the mosquito fleet?
I'm
With the
sorry?
mosquito fleet? The smaller boat people.
Well, yeah, the group that formed our club came out. We don't know for sure. We haven't seen any actual records of this, but it's almost certain that our group came out of the Mosquito fleet.
Because they were smaller boats. They were,
Yes,
yeah.
this was formed, the Mosquito fleet was formed before our group formed our club. They were mainly members of the San Francisco Yacht Club, who were formed for exactly the same reason that we were. And our group just was came out of that fleet. There had been some regattas organized, or at least a regatta that I know of, organized before we were founded, regatta of the Mosquito fleet.
Now, is that the one by Charles Yale? Is that
That's, yes,
Okay.
and we probably have some information on that in our records.
Yeah, that would be good to double check.
Yeah.
And he was a member of SFYC, San Francisco Yacht Club.
Yes,
right?
he was, but he's also a member of Corinthian.
Yes. Now, Kay, would you like to talk a little bit about how we got formed? How did we actually come
Well,
about?
I've already mentioned it, that there was these two yacht clubs here, the Pacific Yacht Club, or the San Francisco Yacht Club and the Pacific Yacht Club, and our people were not comfortable there, or they didn't feel welcome there. And so they decided to form they met in March 16th, 1886, at a place known as Harry's in San Francisco. It was also called Arion Hall. That was the official name, but it was owned by a guy named Henry Grimm, whose nickname was Harry. So
Okay.
everybody referred to it as Harry's. Anyway, it had some rooms in the basement, and so kind of under the leadership of Joe Tracy.
Okay.
Leadership of Joe Tracy, they had a meeting in March 16th of 1886. This meeting was to decide what to do, because they were all unhappy with the existing situation. So they met at Harry's in Parlor C, which was a room in the basement. And out of that meeting, at that meeting, they decided to form a new yacht club. Well, 2 weeks later, in April 1st of 1886, they actually, well, let me jump back. At that first meeting, they appointed committees to do various things, like one committee to establish the bylaws, a committee to choose a name, a committee to do this, to select officers, so forth and so on. And so all those committees made their reports at the April 1st meeting, and they chose the name Corinthian because it meant amateur.
Now, that was in Irving Hall?
Irving Hall
Irving
in
Hall.
San Francisco, which was on, I believe, on Bush Street. I don't know much about it, but
Okay.
it was there.
So now, as I recall, a lot of this information was actually covered in our local newspapers? Was this-
Yes, much of newspapers carried a lot of information in those days about the doings of yacht clubs. And they did that up through probably the 20s. In the 20s, that seemed to taper off, and by the time we got to present time, you can hardly see anything about yacht clubs in the newspaper. But in those days, the early 1900s, or late 1800s and early 1900s, most of whatever was happening in a yacht club was reported in the newspapers, which is very fortunate. That made it very easy convenient for us to research and find out what went on.
Because we've seen a lot of those articles that document all that.
That is correct.
Yeah, right there. That's pretty cool. And so we got started, and then can you tell us a little bit about how we came over here and made a clubhouse and all that kind of history?
Well, came over here.
Mm-hmm. Because we met in San Francisco.
No, they met in San Francisco.
Right. But they never wanted to be there?
No, they never wanted to be in San Francisco. They were trying to decide where to locate. And at one point, I think they sent people out in their boats to sail around and look for a suitable location. I think they did that a couple times, even after we had located here. But anyway, they decided on the tip of what was then Valentine's Island, and they got a lease, which is in that, I forget what they paid for it, it's in that paper that you have.
Let's see, is that the one that was $4,000 or $6,000 or something?
I thought 5,000, but
Yeah.
whatever's in there. Anyway, they got a lease, so they blasted out a ledge on the tip of Valentine's Island, which was a rocky tip. They blasted out a ledge, and in 1887, the members themselves built a small clubhouse, which they painted red.
We actually have lots of, is it paintings of it or something?
We have paintings of it, we
Yeah.
have photographs of it.
Yeah, the first one.
Yes. And so it was painted red so you could see it all over the bay from everywhere. Anyway, that established the first clubhouse.
Okay.
And the club grew rapidly. And by the middle 1900s, of the now 3 yacht clubs, they were the largest.
Yeah, in your notes here of our history tour, you said it by 1900 we had 220 members, which
Okay.
was the largest on the bay.
That's probably, yes, that's correct.
Wow.
And they made some additions to the clubhouse during the 1890s. They added a boat dock on the east side, which is for boat storage building, which is still there. Then they added a locker space, which is also still there. We know it as Pneumonia Alley.
Yeah, the infamous Pneumonia Alley.
Right. But they wanted to enlarge the clubhouse or do something, but the whole island was owned by Thomas B. Valentine, which is why it was called Valentine's Island. He had acquired it from the Reed family. And he refused, I think they had what did they have? Look in that paper.
Yeah, it says
Link
here
to the
he
lease.
refused to renew the lease, and he died in 1896.
That is correct, but
Okay.
I can't remember how long the original lease was. It's in
It was a 5-year lease.
5-year
In
lease.
so that would have been, 91?
Yeah.
Yes.
When the lease ran out, he refused to renew it, and so they were there just paying month to month.
So we couldn't make too many improvements.
No, they couldn't make too many improvements, that is correct. They wanted to enlarge the clubhouse or build a new one or do something, and they couldn't. So anyway, Valentine died in 1896, but his wife, Jenny, also would not renew the lease. So they were still on a month-to-month thing. Then it came out in the newspapers that they were planning a grand hotel on the ledge that the Corinthians had blasted out.
Yeah, you have a note here, something along the lines to rival the Hotel del Coronado
In San Diego.
in San Diego. That would
is
have been pretty
correct.
grand.
Pardon?
Oh, I know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Wet your whistle, because you got stories to tell. Yeah, that's funny that they wanted to do that.
And so anyway, this was apparently a proposal, at least it was listed in the paper in 1902, listed in the newspapers that they were planning this big hotel and the Corinthian would have to move. Well, they once again sent out everybody in their boats to search for a new location, but nothing ever came of that.
Okay.
Also, nothing ever came of the hotel plans. There was a group of investors, apparently, who were leading this, and who they were is not known because the newspaper thing was fronted by a lawyer. That's all we knew, was the lawyer who was doing the talking.
Okay.
And obviously, for this to take place, this group would have to purchase the property from Jenny Valentine. Well, that never happened. We don't know whether Jenny decided not to or just what happened there, but it never happened. And finally, in about
You have a note, 1907.
1907, a new group was formed. Or was it a new group? We don't know. Maybe it's the same group. But this was a group of supposedly local investors who did purchase the island. And at first they considered the hotel plans, but then changed their mind and decided to subdivide the island.
We all know what that is now, don't we?
Yes. And I suspect that this group wasn't stupid and that they realized by subdividing they could make a lot more money selling lots than they could just, selling to one big hotel and the rest of the island fancy grounds.
You have here that it was the Corinthian Island Company that they formed and
Yes,
sold
it
off
is.
small lots, yeah.
Corinthian Island was formed, and since they decided to subdivide, then they were willing to sell the tip to the Corinthian Yacht Club, which they did. Corinthian purchased it. The island was subdivided and renamed Corinthian Island after the club.
That's an interesting point, because not
Yes.
too many people would know that our club, the Corinthian Yacht Club, actually named Corinthian Island. I mean, everyone thinks it would be the opposite.
That's true. Everybody thinks that
Yeah.
the yacht club was named because it's sitting on an island. But not true. So anyway, then once they purchase the property, now they can go ahead and make plans for a new building, a larger building, which they did. Plans were drawn up in 1911,
Yeah, it says
by
January.
1911,
Right.
and began construction in late 1911, I believe
It
was.
says construction was completed by May of 1912.
That is
so,
correct. And they
yeah.
had their grand opening on July 4th.
Yeah, oh, July 4th, okay. And they said the estimated cost was about $25,000.
That's probably, yes, correct.
Huh. And how did we favor that? We raised our dues.
Well, they probably did. They had assessments.
And then assessments,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was opened with a gala celebration on July 4th. Now, something like that would have been covered in the papers too, I would assume.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Very definitely. No,
Okay.
we have photographs of it and some from the newspapers. No, that was very definitely covered in the newspaper.
And you also have here that we took $25,000 to build it, and we took out a mortgage, and we paid it off, and it was ceremoniously burned in 1914. So you must have paid it all off.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So the
That's
original.
how they paid for a lot of it. It was mortgage.
The Moni Alley said that was not torn down, but of course the original clubhouse was.
That is correct.
Okay.
Pneumonia Alley remained, and so did the boat storage
Okay.
building, which they're still there now.
Yep.
And Pneumonia Alley provides our southernmost deck,
Okay.
and the boat storage provides our easternmost deck today.
All right. I'm trying to think. I'm checking out some of these other notes that you kind of gave to me a little while back. A lot of this research you found in the J. Porter Shaw Library.
Yes,
And
that's one of the locations.
Okay. What other sources did you?
Well, both the newspapers, all of the, well, both. There were several newspapers. Excuse me. There were several newspapers in those days. One of them that was very good was it still exists, is the Sausalito News, which they have in the Sausalito upstairs from the library. I guess it's their historical.
Their historical society,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, you gave me an interesting fact here that probably no one's going to really believe, Will. But you said, and when we built this clubhouse in 1912, there was no bar.
That is correct.
Now,
There
why was that?
In the bylaws, there was a clause that said no alcohol will ever, or liquor, I don't remember how they phrased it, will ever be sold in the clubhouse.
Well, I'll drink to that, Will. Here, toast you.
That was not changed till, criminy, I think in 1950s.
Let's see what you told me here. Yeah, because the first bar couldn't be installed because they had prohibition, and that was repealed in the 30s. And, they had a member, wait a second, I know they had liquor here.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but we have pictures of them under the original clubhouse.
Aha,
Not
okay.
in the building, under the building.
Okay.
And so they got around it.
Because there were stories during Prohibition about boats coming in it was under Pneumonia Alley where they offloaded some liquor. Is that a true story? Is that figment?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do not know.
Okay.
Could well have been.
So the members bar, so the first bar,
First bar.
when did that come in?
When they remodeled the building, and I'm not completely sure of the dates, but when the original building had open porches on the south side, both floors, lower and upper and lower.
Okay.
The lower floor, main floor, where the dining room is today, was a locker room. And it had a porch, open porch. Well, in the 1950s, I believe it was, we need to do some more research on
Okay.
this. 1950s, they enclosed the porch, the lower porch, and that became the first bar.
Where the dining room is now.
Well, no, where the porch
Oh,
of
with
the
the
dining
porch.
room.
Okay.
The dining room, I think, was still locker room.
That's what you have a note here that it was still a locker room. And the area that is now the lounge was originally outside the wall of the building. It was enclosed in the 60s. So that's when those porches must have been enclosed.
The lounge, what,
Well, it says here, the area that is now the lounge, which I guess is the bar area, was originally outside wall of the building.
well, I don't know if that's phrased exactly right.
Okay, well, it's something we'll have to research.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where the bar is now was the original dining room.
Right.
The lounge, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Remember exactly what that's referring to.
Yeah.
Lounge. Is that the
I don't know.
dining room?
It was originally outside the wall of the building is what the notes say here. So it's something we're gonna have to research then.
Well, that's the porch.
Okay.
That's the open porch that was enclosed. And what's now the bar room was extended southward to match the wall of the porch as it was enclosed.
Yeah, we have pictures of that. Now that I'm figuring this in my mind, it's right, Yuda, that's the pictures we
Yeah.
see.
Go
That was an
downstairs.
outside porch,
Yeah.
right?
Go downstairs and look at, right by the television set, you'll see a pillar.
Yes.
That was the wall of the building.
Okay.
That was the outside wall where that pillar was. And the rest has been enclosed.
That's during various remodels we've
In
had.
various remodels, the big one was in the 1960s, early 60s. I'm not sure the dates. We need to look that up.
And how much that one must have cost.
Yes. That was,
And then, of course, most recent one in 2020, that's got to be,
yes.
we'll have to do that too. We'll have to get that in our history,
But the big one was in the 60s.
60s.
That's when the bar was turned, what's now the bar was the dining room, was converted into the bar. The locker room was made into the dining room. The entrance to the club, which had been on the south side, was moved to where it is now.
Okay.
And that was probably the most extensive change to the building.
Right, the others have just mostly updated and
Yeah.
reconfigured what was inside, wasn't it?
Right.
Okay.
And the recent one was, well, that was significant, but all it did was really enlarge the kitchen, or
The galley and change where the heads were.
that's right.
Yeah, all that. Okay. I was trying to look here to get an idea of when some of the harbor, because we had like a pier out there for,
That's true.
and when do you know when that pier was put in or when,
Well, the pier goes way back.
does
but
it? Okay.
The harbor wasn't built until the 1960s, about the same time as that.
Oh, our remodel.
Yeah, as the remodel, maybe a little later, when they built the first breakwater, and then were able to put in slips.
Now, those slips were originally purchased to finance the building.
Yeah, they were. That's right. You had to purchase the slip. I can't remember exactly, but yeah. It
Now, that was the Corinthian Harbor Company.
the Corinthian Harbor Company, exactly.
Okay. Okay. And of course, You had to buy a slip then.
Yeah, she had to buy a slip or rent from somebody who owned it.
But the purchase of the slips, that created the funding for building the harbor? I mean,
Yes,
Okay.
that's how they
Okay.
financed it.
and then it turned over to the club, because it was owned by the harbor company, a separate entity. That
Yeah,
ran the
that-
harbor.
That's correct. A corporation, but it was a separate company, but associated with the club. And that was done in the 1900s. John Culver was a big operator of that, caused it to happen.
Okay. In reviewing some of the notes that you've got here, Will, can you tell us a little bit about why we have a stage in our fabulous ballroom here?
Well, the original Corinthians back in the old little clubhouse, they used to love to put on what they called hijinks, or sometimes low jinks, I guess. But anyway, they were like skits or maybe small comedy staged things. And this was a tradition in the original Corinthian. And so when they built the clubhouse, they built a stage in the ballroom to provide for the hijinks.
And we still have this beautiful stage. I bet you we're the only yacht club that has such a gorgeous
That's
stage.
probably true.
Exactly. So should we cover it pick it up at another time? Excellent. Thank you, Will.
Okay,
I think we'll pick this up another time, and we have some research to do too.
we sure do.
Okay.
But what would be fun